Okay, we are broadcasting.
Welcome. I want to welcome everybody to our Eldorado Hills Community Council meeting for the month of June. Recognizing we have the COVID situation in place, we're doing a Zoom meeting as opposed to our typical face-to-face. And we've also changed the time frame, which we normally meet at 7 p.m. to 5 p.m. So that may have unfortunately created some confusion for people. So we're still attempting to get our panelists on board. But Kim, could you identify how many dial-in members or participants, I should say, we have at this point in time? Is there anybody on the phones?
Right now we have 10, but one of them is John Vinya, so I'm going to go ahead and promote him to panelist.
Okay. All right, very good. So we do have attendance, and that's what I want to make sure is we had some people on the phone lines, and it wasn't just the leadership team, so to speak, that we're having the discussion. So excellent. So Kim, once you finish working with John, if you would just kind of go over the Zoom protocols for us to let people know how to either raise their hand if they are on Zoom, or how to indicate that they'd like to speak, open up their line if they're on the phone.
Of course. We'll all announce that what item we're taking public comment on, and then I'll request that they make sure that they unmute themselves when called upon. If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. The clerk will call you by the last 3 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to speak. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record.
Very good, thank you. What I'm going to do is kind of do the roll call for the leadership team. Then I'd ask everyone who's present from the leadership team just to quickly define what area of responsibilities you have, since we have to remember we have people participating on the phone. They can't see faces. They may not know names. So this is kind of our introduction, if you will. So with that, John Bania, can you tell us what your role is?
I'm Infrastructure Planning Commissioner.
Very good, thank you. Richard Ross is not with us unless he's on the phone. Richard, are you there? Okay, and Chief Mike Lilienthal, are you there? Okay, then let's move on to John Davey. I know John's on, so.
I am on. John Davey, I'm the chair of the Eldorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee, a resident volunteer organization that looks at proposed development projects in Eldorado Hills and provides resident feedback to the applicants, to the Planning Commission, the Planning Department, and the Board of Supervisors.
Very good, thank you, John. And then Cindy.
I'm Cindy Munt. I'm Supervisor Heidal's assistant, and I do the community information and outreach for the community council.
All right, very good. And then normally we'd also recognize the District 1 volunteer commissioners and committee members who are not part of the Leadership Council. So if any of those who may be on the phone would like to acknowledge their presence and describe for us or help us understand what their role is with the county activities as a commissioner or committee member, they'd be welcome to do that at this point. So Kim, if you would go ahead and acknowledge what they should press to unmute themselves.
Please press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Accepting comment from Doe to Bladen.
This is Tita Bladen. Tita Bladen,
Yes.
Commission on Aging.
Thank you, Tia. Is there anybody else?
Are you going to take comments from her now? Because there are others with their hands raised.
Yeah, she was just acknowledging who she was representing. So that's all we were doing. It wasn't really comments. It was just acknowledging our volunteers that they're present in the meeting and participating. So it's just an acknowledgement, not a description at this point. So if there's anyone else who would like to acknowledge that they are a commissioner or a committee member, is welcome to identify themselves at this point.
Accepting public comment from John Rasler.
John Rasler, Eldorado County Ombudsman.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
There's no one else with their hand raised.
Very good. Thank you, Kim. So with that, I'm going to move to item 2, adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Is there anyone on the leadership team who has any suggested changes to tonight's agenda?
No.
All right, then seeing none, we'll adopt agenda as presented. And we'll move on to item 3, public comment. So this is the portion of the meeting which we would encourage anyone who would like to add a comment, raise a question, or explain something that might have happened recently in the community that they're concerned about to go ahead and do at this point in time if it's not part of our agendized items. So anything that's not on tonight's agenda that any member of the public would like to speak to, they're welcome to do that at this point. So again, Kim, if you would open that up for them and just describe how they would comment.
Of course. Now taking public comment on item 3, please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you are joining the meeting by phone, press star 9 to indicate a desire to comment. The clerk will call you by the last 3 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. Accepting public comment from Joel Wiley.
Joel, good to hear from you.
Hello there.
Proceed.
I just wanted to say thank you for using Zoom to go ahead and try to start these programs up again while we're doing social distancing. That's
I
it.
appreciate the comment. I think it's timely. It's just unfortunate that you don't normally get the participation when you try to do the Zoom meetings, has been my experience, because a lot of people are just not willing to take the time, or it's too difficult or whatever. But I appreciate everybody who has participated in this session, and hopefully we'll gain some momentum into next month's meeting if we're still in the Zoom mode, which I suspect we will be, but we'll hope for the better. So thank you. Any other public comment?
There's no other public comment. Oh, excuse me, there is. Accepting public comment from John Rasler.
I noticed that as I'm walking, you have many lots that have signs saying that the fire department is requiring them to clear those lots. Who has to pay for the clearance of those lots? The owners, or will the county pay for that?
So Chief Lilly, do you happen to be on? I'll give anybody from the fire department the opportunity to respond, and maybe Tim can help us. Maybe Tim, you'd be the appropriate responder since it's really the Elrod Hills Fire Department's jurisdiction. So are you comfortable with that, Tim?
Yes, I am.
Okay, if you please respond to John then.
Yeah, John, yes, the board of directors about 2 months ago approved a list of vacant lots that had not cleared their weeds and stuff. And there were about 700 or 800 in El Dorado Hills Fire Department area. What happens is notice is mailed to the address for mailing. No posted. If there's no response within 45 days, signs are posted on the vacant lots. If the owner does not respond within the time frame posted on the sign, then the fire department will engage an outside contractor to clear the lots, and a lien in the amount of the clearance fee will be posted, will be attached to the real property. So when the next property taxes are due, there will be a bill for unpaid lien clearance. So the county and the fire department do not pay for this out of their own pocket. It is a lien put on the property, and it's a property owner's responsibility to pay.
Thank you.
Yep. So essentially, the fire department fronts the money to get the work done, but they're reimbursed by the lien process if it has to go that far. And in past experience, we found that after you send out about the second notice, you end up getting probably 80% voluntary compliance of people recognizing they need to just go do it and take care of it. Some people who are out of area prefer to have the fire department take care of it, and then once they're billed for that cost, they pay it, as opposed to letting a lien process. So there's a number of different steps in that, but it's a very worthwhile program. The bottom line is the county commits no direct funds to it at all. It's really just a fronting of funding until reimbursement by the fire department. Very good. Any other public comment at this point?
There's no other public comment.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And with that, I'd like to move on to item 4. Our guest speaker is Tanya DiGiorno, and she is a newly appointed Director of our Information Technology. And so I'd like to introduce her and basically ask her to give us a little bit of her background, her resume, so to speak, the things she was involved with before coming to El Dorado County, and then to kind of proceed into some of her observations in assessing the county's level of software, and in particular the public access and information software that is widely distributed for public inputs, TrackIt being one of the most common ones. But I wanted Tanya to be able to share with us her assessments on where we are today in terms of implementation and maturity, and then hopefully share with us some plans as to what we see or anticipate happening over the next 6 months, year, or whatever time frame it is. So with that, Tanya, are you ready to go ahead and kind of give us some more information?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes?
Run through fine
Great.
here.
Great. Sorry. Ironically, my county issued device keeps kicking me off. I don't know if it's my internet or the county issued device, but so I apologize. My video is no longer available on my home system. So thank you again for having me as a guest speaker, John. When you first told me about this group in March, I was so excited to come to your facility and meet with all of you guys, but I suppose Zoom will suffice for now, but I do look forward to meeting all of you guys in person when the normalcy returns to our world and we can get back to some socialization. And I think a person to person and getting to know people and understanding the users of our systems is important. And I know we can do so much with Zoom, but I really want to get to know the people. So I look forward to that moment. So hopefully I can come to, you guys will invite me to future meetings, John, and I can
Absolutely.
get to know your users. So a little bit about my background. I came from the state of California. I've worked for the state for the last 23 years. Most of my time was at the Department of Justice, doing application development, somewhere in the IT field at all times, but mostly working on intelligence systems, the firearm systems, anything law enforcement related, actually. So really great experience. Then I realized, Homeland Security wasn't that big of a deal in 2013 as it was earlier on, and health was a big deal. It was the Obamacare was in place, and so I made a jump over to healthcare services to help them out. They were receiving a lot of federal funds, but they had to do things in a certain manner. And when I read the strategic plan, I thought, how can you fail? This is great. He's got it all laid out. So I made a move, went over to healthcare services for a little bit. And then I was quickly recruited over to the California Department of Technology, where I did a level of oversight for high-risk IT projects in the state. You may have heard of a small project called CAMIS. It's the Medicaid system for California. It's a small $500 million project that wasn't going so well when I first started. And they made a switch to Agile in the middle of a waterfall project, which was very detrimental to the entire organization as well as the project itself. And so I half joke and I say I have a little PTSD when it comes to the word Agile, but I do see the value in Agile, and if implemented correctly and you have the right culture for it, it makes a lot of sense, especially in the world today that we live in, when it's so heavily insaturated with I need it now, give it to me, so the now generation, and they're not going to wait 2 years to do your planning, another 2 years for procurement, and another year to deliver. 5 years later you might get something that you wanted 5 years previous. Those days are over. So what I'm looking for and why I left the state is this opportunity came about. And I'm a big thing of when things come about, come across your path, you need to pay attention. And so I kind of had this attitude, and John will know, he sat on one of the panels, that it was like, if it was meant to be, it's not going to pass me by. But a part of me really believed that I was hitting the wall a lot with the state, trying to do the right things and trying to move a big behemoth ship like the state of California. It's just difficult, and you have to start with small wins, and you have to start with with successes, right? You can't argue with success. And so I started thinking to myself, maybe I'm trying to do too much. Maybe if I go to a smaller county or city, or even a smaller city, that maybe I can be more effective in moving that needle in the right direction. And so when this opportunity came about, it had my pedigree all over it. And I just thought, wow, all the things I've learned in my career, all the lessons learned in my career and those around me, I've learned so much. And I felt like I can lend it myself to a smaller county like this in my experience. Now, I joke all the time and I said, man, I wish I was here like 7 years ago before the decommissioning of their mainframe system, but I'm here now, and I'm hopeful I could still, be effective and make some very necessary changes when it comes to system delivery within the Eldorado. And so just to share a little bit, what I've learned is we decommissioned a 30-year-old plus mainframe system in July of last year. I started in December of last year, so a little bit late for the planning of that. But what I observed is over the past 5 years prior to me coming on board, the county embarked on these large modernization efforts, and modernizations are difficult and not from a technology perspective, but from an organizational change perspective, right? I'm used to doing it this way because that's what I was taught. And then how do you help them understand that the outcomes are the same, but the business way of getting there, we just shortened your path, so you don't have to take 30 steps to get to the outcome. We can do it in 3, right? So just getting people to understand that, I think is one of the keys to success in implementing a modernized solution. And what I observed is most of the solutions that were delivered were commercial off-the-shelf solutions, COT solutions, known as COT solutions. And those are often selected to mitigate risk, and they offer well thought out turnkey solutions, if you will. And yeah, sometimes that works out in your favor, and sometimes it just doesn't. And so we're going through some stabilization in some of these applications that have been implemented. However, I think it's a little bit of a learning and growing pain too. Again, when you've done things a certain way for so long and that system doesn't do it, your human nature tells you change the system to do it the way I've done it. But we just kind of need to change that mindset and make sure that we're listening to what the business needs are, and we're meeting it accordingly, and not really defining the hows, but the whats of what our needs are. So I do want to say there's a large portion of our technology solutions that are now vendor supported. However, there's still a large volume of internal development that is occurring, and it's when I came into the organization, it's really on a case-by-case basis, and we had a funding model that lended itself at the time. But I think times have changed quite a bit, and really, in order to be successful as an IT director at the Eldorado County, I need to empower the business to prioritize and make the decisions. And the business really needs to empower the public to prioritize and make some decisions on what the needs are of the public. And that's why I thought this team would be a very good team to tap into, because I think even at the state level, what we fail to do often is understand the needs of the end users. And oftentimes we think about how we know things in the government, and the way we think about government is not the way the citizens think of government. I mean, even if you go talk to people about what their thoughts are, and let's say taxes and paying their taxes online or something, if you worked at Franchise Tax Board, you speak a different lingo. I would say if you work for any state organization or even any government organization, you got to get over the alphabet soup after the first 6 months of being there, because you're just throwing all these acronyms all the time, and again, it's a different lingo that you pick up on over time, but the citizens don't. So I think it's really important that we take a step back and we understand things from a user perspective and provide solutions that meet the user's needs. I will be embarking on a redesign of our public-facing website, but I will not do it without the input from groups like you, from public community groups that have a need, because again, we shouldn't model our site based on how we're organized, because that's just silly, because they would have no idea how to find anything, but we should organize it based on how they think of things. And so that is part of what I plan to do in the next 6 to 12 months is look at that website. But I'm also embarking on a couple of major tasks internally, which is to establish IT governance that is controlled by the business. And that in and of itself will ensure that the most important items are prioritized and the work is worked on to completion before we embark on a new priority. And my intentions are really to establish that continuous delivery model that I spoke of earlier. And that ensures some flexibility, that the delivery model as well, that we're establishing this delivery model, but also empowering the business to provide that prioritization and guidance to the IT department. I've been talking about this for some time. We've established I actually had people raise their hands to participate. So we're establishing that group, and then we're going to start working on the IT governance model and how it feeds into the board members, how the public contributes to it. And we're going to then socialize that so we can make sure that we have the right input as we move forward in any of the endeavors that IT embarks upon in the next couple of years. A couple of things that we are also doing is really looking at building efficiencies within the IT department. During my tenure at the California Department of Technology, I was the Chief Information Officer, my most recent prior to coming to El Dorado County. And it's really important that we ensure resources understand the expectations and they can deliver according to what we have planned as the activity. It's our responsibility as IT and business leaders to build that governance model and those internal efficiencies to deliver those secure quality solutions for the customers, and always have reusability in mind. So with that, I am embarking on introducing what's called a reference architecture. It's a thoughtful architecture that will provide a framework to where we can encourage the reusability of our code. We can standardize. We can make sure that nothing goes into production unless it's fully vetted. We're implementing tools that will help us. We're in a pilot with Veracode right now. It's something that I implemented at Technology, but that helps you with security vulnerabilities of your code and trying to get people to think more in a infrastructure as code, because as you deliver applications, you need to think security from all layers of that architecture. And so in the last 6 months, I've been heavily working on establishing training for my staff. I call them like a baseline training for the developers. And their career paths is what they're called. And so they're required to take this level of training. So everybody has a base knowledge of how we do things. And then what we're establishing is what's called, I don't like to call them standards because it sounds so rigid, right? But I call them guardrails, because in order for people in IT to remain innovative and be able to continue with their creativity and to solve problems in a way that's comfortable to them, but also within the guidelines, you have to give them some flexibility. So we're establishing those type of processes and procedures within our IT structure. It has taken a little time because it is, again, like I said, it's a mindset change. It's not just put this process in place and then everybody will march to this order. It's not about that. It's about getting people to believe that the reason why we make decisions is because there's a benefit, and here's the benefit and why we make these decisions. So I'm really hoping, and I see some positive change already with people. I mean, there's a little bit of when you standardize things and you offer up templates, even though you have the best intention of easing their workload, there's a little bit of you're changing my work. So I'm just kind of getting them acclimated to the new ways of doing things, and we're really just trying to structure things to where we can, one, control the data that we manage within the county, control, secure it, and make sure that only those that have the right to access the information are accessing it, and adhering to all of our privacy rules and retention policies and so forth, and making sure that we're architecting things from the data up. So making sure that we have those access privileges, who owns the data, who's allowed to change the data in place as we're building out this reusable architecture or framework, if you will, going forward. It's going to take some time, but I do believe it's going to build the efficiencies that are needed within the organization. Right now, we have a spectrum from kids right out of high school to the mainframe developers that are, have been up with the county for 30 years. So we have the spectrum, and trying to pull the people together to understand the mission and vision going forward is going to be actually a very exciting and fun journey for our IT department as well as the organization.
So Tanya, would you speak specifically to Track It, Megabyte, and those kinds of tools, and the assessments and the upgrades that we're working on, just to give people kind of a heads up of the assessments that you've done and which direction we're trying to move?
Sure. So I didn't share this, but you may have already known that during the implementation, there was some level, I would say, my observation was there was some lack of planning at the very beginning, and that's often the case when you have troubled implementation. It's always due to some lack of planning. For Track It, there was an implementation that occurred in May of 2018. I'm not sure what happened for the last 2 years, but they've been waiting for the remainder, probably 70% of the application to be delivered. We just delivered that on May 18th. We're going through stabilization. It is available online already. It's available to the public as well as the inspectors and the building and planning and the GIS. We are stabilizing with that, just working through minor issues now. We've worked through all the major issues. One last remaining thing that was never actually in the system that's going to be available very soon is the historical data from the assessors. So that had never been available to the public, so we're going to be making that available again. Actually, I should say since mainframe, and so we'll be making that information available again. There's quite a bit of enhancements to the system that was implemented in 2018. So pretty excited that was finally fully deployed after 2 years of waiting and a lot of workarounds and inefficiencies that were created for not having a full system in place. So that's been a great experience to see that get through. We're not quite there yet, so I'm not ready to celebrate just yet, but I'm hearing very good feedback at this point, so I'm very hopeful. As far as Megabyte is a system that was implemented as one of the breakaway systems from the mainframe, and Megabyte is currently supported in 36 other counties. This is another system that I will be diving into very soon after the stabilization of Track It is completed. It is something that I would like to look at how we can go forward in partnership with the other counties. What I've learned from this system is and my assessment is it was built for a few counties and quickly grew to 36. And when you start a company like that, not planning for the bigger growth, you generally don't build it to scale like you should. What we're finding is the ability to make changes within the system is getting worse and worse. And so we're going to be working with Carl Wieland to come up with some plan forward to see how we can assist. What we've been actually helping Carl do is build, I don't really want to call them shadow systems, but they're these ancillary systems that meet the needs that Megabyte just can't do. And if all the counties are faced in doing the same thing, then I think it's time that we pull together and put our minds together and come up with a model that makes sense. I was even kind of throwing out some ideas about developing a governance model and making it a almost like an open source community amongst the counties, so we can build what we want for that system, because the data is the data. If we can control that data and we can understand how to share that data, I think it can be done. It's just something that we're going to have to start looking at a little bit more holistically at in the future, because what I'm seeing happen right now is we're slowly breaking away that functionality and building the system internally that will eventually meet all the needs of Megabyte. So in that sense, why don't we look at how do we do it statewide potentially? The dollar amount we pay on that system on a monthly basis is just a bit outrageous to me, and how we can bring that internally across the state would just be an amazing cost analysis to do, to be honest with you. And with the times that we're going to face going forward, I think we need to be more in that mindset. And even though it may not be something that we're ready to take on, we should be making decisions that move us in that direction. And so, and again, that's the mindset that I'm talking about. It's not necessarily a, I'm going to put it on paper and you're going to behave this way. It's really, we have to see the behavior change to think that way and make decisions based on that.
Right.
So that's
Economies of scale. That sounds like a great opportunity. And let me just clarify for people who may not be familiar with some of these software tools that Megabyte is a software set that primarily serves the needs of the county assessor, the county tax collector, and the county auditor controller. So they were the executive leadership team that was put together to help implement, to select a vendor for the tool that was necessary and then to implement it. So Carl Weiland was the lead of that executive group as our county assessor. And so that's what Tanya is referring to in terms of the discussions there. So most of those applications right now are more internal. But for instance, a lot of the data that comes from, that's within Megabyte can be used in Trackit to provide a broader data source through the Trackit tool, which has much broader exposure to the public. So, and maybe Tanya, it'd be best if you describe what Trackit is from your perspective in terms of both the internal and the external usage, and then maybe we can go to questions.
Sure. So Trackit's heavily used for planning and building when they're, and so you're right. We exchange data from the assessor on a daily basis with Trackit, and that's actually where we will be sending the historical data over to Trackit to be able to present that out to the public as well. But essentially, what it's used for from a public perspective is being able to find out any type of information related to your property or any associated APN of that property. So that property may have been, 50 acres at one point and then split down and then split down and split down. And so you could go through and see the history of that piece of property and every permit associated with it. This is heavily used by private organizations when it comes to real estate, the selling of property, buyers of property. So it's very important that we have this information that's accurate and people can do the research online and find the information that they need related to any outstanding liens on the property or any type of information related to the property. The thought is this will be a all-inclusive permitting system for the public. So you'll be able to go on and pay permits online and find out the status of your permits. It's a very useful tool to the public, and when it goes down, we hear it. So we don't want it to go down. We want it to be a very stable and provide the information that the public wants and looks for on a daily basis. I believe they mentioned they did about 70,000 applications in a year through the system. And so it's a very useful tool for, again, not only El Dorado County, but the citizens of El Dorado County and the small businesses that support it as well. I can actually show you guys a couple of things if you're interested, or we could save it. I can come back and share when it's completed.
Why don't you share it when it's complete? Because I think, you know, being able to hopefully get back together and then show the visuals and stuff,
Sure.
I think that's much more effective since for the most part, it's a work in progress. I was just hoping to let people know that we have changed the focus within, you know, county government to try to be more responsive to the public's needs relative to information technology and transparency and all those things that go under good governance. And you've mentioned that several different times in your discussion. But at this point, I think I'd like to segue into questions and answers.
Sure.
And I know we have several users of Trackit at least, and we have at least one ex-county employee involved. So is there anybody on the leadership panel or on the phone that would like to ask a question or make a comment at this point?
Oh, sorry, John Davey.
Go right ahead, John.
Yeah, Tanya, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Look forward to meeting you. Before I was a planning commissioner, I worked for Eldorado County DOT for 29 years. And we used LMIS, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
And I have heard that accessing the data, you know, with the new system in place, accessing the old LMIS data has been challenging to say the least. And we had a recent example where we were reviewing a project and planning had thought that they had an illegal structure on the site, but in fact, it was permitted under design review, and the applicant himself had to dig up his old approval and submit it to planning. So I don't know if there's any plans to, because we're talking about probably close to 40 years of historical data in the LMIS, and it's pretty significant. And I don't know if there's any plans to, you know, make some efforts to to recoup that information. I don't know if you can share concerning
Sure.
that.
I can actually share that. We are in the process. We've actually given them several different exports of the data, and they have presented in different ways. And so we're just kind of working through the final display. So basically, when you pull up any type of property, you will see those that historical information. You'll be able to pull it up. How the business was handling it was they were just pulling those reports out of LMIS and then uploading them as an attachment. And I said, absolutely not. We're going to send the data and they're just going to present it, display it in the way that the business wants. So business has defined how they want it displayed already. And now it's going to be, actually tomorrow at 9 o'clock, we have a meeting to go over what's in test. And as soon as the business approves it, we'll be rolling that to production. So we're hopeful within the next couple of weeks, you'll have full history of what was in LMIS and the property system loaded into Trackit.
Okay.
That was a long-winded, sorry, I could have just told you. Yeah,
That's fine. Appreciate that. And I just wanted to lodge my vote. I know I don't have a vote. I sure wish I could keep my planning commission email. I hear that's supposed to change, but just thought I'd put it out there, but thank you very much.
That's your vote, is to have the historical, that's it?
No, that's my vote to keep my current email.
Oh.
My vote is I want to keep my current email. I don't want to have to change it, but with all, you know, the stuff that I have on my current email. So, but I know I don't have a vote, but I just thought I'd put it out there. Thank you.
So who's next on the leadership team? And then we'll take the phone call. So John.
Well, hi, Tanya. It's another John. This is John Davey. I'm the chair of APAC. And, you know, we historically, when Trackit rolled out, we were looking at that for supporting documentation for projects that were coming before us, before that information would hit Legistar or anything else like that. And what we noticed is that it's very difficult. The search functions were very difficult because the way the data was input based off of if you knew a developer's name, an applicant's name, the names weren't consistent across projects, the project names weren't consistent, the project numbers weren't consistent. And so we struggled trying to find it. But the one thing we did note is that when we get notification from planning and building services of when a project's proposed, they just say, you know, find it and track it, but there's never an exact link that goes through that specific project or that permitting process. And what I know is that if you can append the URL and track it with a project number variable, and that's how I share the information with other members of APAC or other members of the community. would it be possible for that business process at planning and development services to provide those links with a direct URL to a project as opposed to just giving the track it URL and then hoping people can go in and find the project they're looking for?
Yeah, that seems to be an easy fix. Sure. Let me, can I have your email address? It's the jdavy at
Yeah.
Davy Group.
Yeah.
Can I use that? And,
Certainly. Yes.
and get a little more information and we'll put in a ticket. Stabilization should be done at the end of this week. And any tickets that we have in the hopper will get completed within a certain time frame. So we'll make sure this gets in the hopper.
Okay.
And I don't think it doesn't sound like it would be something that couldn't be done. So.
And so my last question for you would be, so there are sort of two concurrent versions of Track It in distribution right now, sort of the legacy version from 2018 and the version that's updated right now? Because they seem to have two different URLs.
So we did take down the old URL.
Okay.
It was read only. It's been read only since the 15th of May.
Okay.
So we are in version 18.2.9 right now. So at the end of this week, we're going to make the decision whether to stay in 18 or go back to 16. And there's absolutely no point to go back to 16 with all the functionality that's been delivered. You'd have some very unhappy customers if one business decided that. So we'll be making that decision this week, though.
Sounds good.
Hey, Tanya, just for your knowledge, APAC has a website they've set up with a lot of documents, historical documents on various development projects that have been brought forward to the county and APAC has commented on and everything else. And it used to be a very effective tool to go in and do a search and find things. But what I've found is a number of the original links that were in there have been broken, which is why the URL part of it has to be taken a little bit with a jaundiced eye, because you have to kind of memorialize these things and decide you're not going to move stuff around, or all of that legacy linkage is for naught. It doesn't do you any good, and there's nothing I've experienced more frustrating to go in and think you're really close to getting information and then find out the URL doesn't connect to anything. So just a heads up on that history of what we've experienced.
So, that's a good point. We'll make sure we have some redirects available for some time, and a note to bookmark.
Yes, thank you. That would be very helpful so that people can get to that for some period while we're doing these transitions, so to speak, and it just doesn't, drop off somewhere. So.
Right.
Anyone else on the leadership team who would like to pose a question or make a comment for Tanya at this point? Okay, seeing none. Kim, why don't you open it up to the phone callers?
Of course. Now taking public comment on item number 4. Please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you are joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. The clerk will call you by the last 3 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. Accepting public comment from Steve and Peggy Willis.
Okay.
Hello, this is Peggy Willis. Tanya, welcome to the team of the county. I'm so happy that the county is upgrading something so critical to the 21st century. I don't know if you had anything to do with the website, but I would like to make a comment for the record that the COVID-19 website information is fabulous, easy, clear. I really like the way it looks, so I just wanted to compliment the county or Tanya, whoever takes that credit, for a really good improvement to that website.
I won't take the credit, but I'll give it to my team. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That was a concerted effort from our public information officer, our CAO, and the web team. So I appreciate you acknowledging that, Peggy. Appreciate it.
Accepting public comment from Joe Wiley.
Hello, this is Joel Wiley in El Dorado Hills. Welcome aboard, Tanya.
Thank you.
I understand what you mean about PTSD with Agile. I kind of felt that way with Track It when I was trying to use it.
Oh, no. Okay.
But I have not tried to use it in over a year. I had given up on it.
Oh,
As John mentioned, that APAC has the website that has a number of valuable information toward links that aren't there. Is it possible that you could add a layer of indirection, that you have a URL that points to a table that has a link to the actual location of a file? And that way, when you move the file, you can just change that link and the original link that we have would still be live.
yes. Yes. I didn't realize there was that much impact to the linkage that's out there, but we should have been thoughtful about that. My apologies, but yes, we can make sure that happens.
Well, that's all right. I had 28 years in state IT. I know how that happens. I perpetrated some of them. That's all I've got.
That's how we learn.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Joel.
Accepting public comment from John Rasler.
All right. Hi, Tanya.
Hey, John.
I'm interested in finding the conditions of approval for the Four Seasons community. And I'm wondering if that type of information can be found on some of the county, on this county website.
Conditions of approval for, I'm sorry.
For the establishment of this community, of the Four Seasons community.
So Tanya, this is a development project that was passed by the Board of Supervisors back in what, the early 2000s, John?
Yeah, it's back at least it's about 15 years ago, yeah.
Right. So one of the things that we've noticed in terms of trying to get records out of planning is obviously we don't go back very far with the online availability of things like conditions of approval, which is really the information that, a lot of the information at least, that what APAC's website is contained, and in the past we've been able to pull up through the county website. But it gets back to something that's 15, 20, 25 years old. And a lot of those things I think were archived. They were never migrated over to some of the current web-enabled tools. And so staff has to go dig through a physical file or something to come up with some of this stuff. And so I think the question in part is there any attempt to try to take some of that more historic data, the older stuff, and try to get it into the current web system?
Yeah, so there's two ways you can get to this information. There's an online property information search tool. If you want the URL, I can give that to you. It's parcel.adcgov.us. And you could search by assessment number, parcel number, the street address, business name, business owner. They even have a mining claim name, mobile. There's all different ways of searching. So I would recommend starting there. But we also have a GIS layer site that you can also use that is very useful. And you can actually access it from our El Dorado County website as well. And I can share that address with you too, if you'd like.
If you could send that to me in an email, some of that information, so that I can research that.
Sure. Do you want to give me your email offline, or do you want to give it to me now?
I'll give it to you now. It's
okay. Go ahead.
Are you ready? JJRAZZ, zebra, PUB at sbcglobal.net.
Okay.
Okay, appreciate it.
I'll send you those two URLs, and you can go ahead and search your way.
Okay, thank you very much, Tanya.
The GIS is really cool because you can zoom in and you can layer it with different information. So I'd highly recommend go take a look at that. You might find things that you never knew existed.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I could provide some additional info on that, planning, keeps their hard copies in archives. So they do have that available if it's not online or, based on, the old data, still trying to transition back in. So that is available through the planning department. They've always kept the best files because they're the lead agency when it comes to these projects. And it was originally called Your Ranch, the Four Seasons project. So you could if Razzler's still on or listening, he could go through planning through their archives as well. So I wanted to say that for Tanya's benefit as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the old historical version of sort of the project tracking, I think it was application status. Anything earlier than 2008 was not digitized. So you could email in and request it, whether they would digitize it or just make physical copies for you to come pick up. That was also always an option. But things like conditions of approval were always in Legistar. And so you might not find it on that project tracking or in Track It Now, but you could find it in Legistar if it was, recorded there. But then you'd have to know the meeting date that it occurred, when it was approved.
Yeah, because the search engine on Legistar is not very good. I can attest to that.
Yeah.
So, okay, very good. Any other questions from anybody that's on the phone or comments, either one?
There's no additional public, no additional public comment.
All right, thank you, Kim. So any final thoughts, Kanya, before we thank you? But
No, I'm really excited. I think we're going to do some great things in El Dorado County, and I'm looking forward to hearing your input of how we can make the external facing solutions better for the citizens and the businesses within El Dorado County. So I look forward to our conversations.
excellent. Well, I want to thank you for volunteering to be our guest speaker, and we will get you back in circulation, so to speak, when we get back to having public meetings, and ask you to share with us, a PowerPoint presentation or something, whatever you want, to try to communicate what has been accomplished since this discussion, because we recognize there's an awful lot going on these days, and so updates every year or something like that are not unreasonable, and we can certainly plan that into the future program. So again, thank you very much for taking your time and helping us understand.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Okay, with that, I'm going to move to item 5, supervisor communications, and try to just share some information that I'm aware of, and I think most of you are, but some of you may not be. Last Friday, on June 5th, the governor put out information relative to additional guidance for stage 3. So we knew that we had some things that he had pulled from stage 3, originally forwarded to stage 2, and sent out guidance on those, but we're now into stage 3, opening guidance. And so there were, I think it's 11 different items here that he produced guidance last Friday on. This is on the website that the state has. And so if you're interested in looking for one of these, I'll give you the website now. It's www.covid19.ca.gov. But on there, you'll be able to, the search engine on that's pretty good, but the stage 3 reopening guidance he provided were for interim guidance on schools and school-based programs. Because a lot of people have been asking what's happening with the school startups, in August and that sort of thing, what's going on. So that gives you some guidance. Restaurants, bars, and wineries were included. Fitness centers and gyms. We've had a lot of interest from people wanting to know when their fitness center, their gym, their therapeutic center, whatever it was going to be able to open up. So this provides the guidance. And with any of these, the requirement is you understand what the guidance is, and then you establish a plan for your business to operate with whatever standards you want. If you want it to specify, for instance, that your staff will wear masks when interfacing with the customer, or they'll be behind a plexiglass barrier, or whatever it is, you can do that. You can adopt industry standards, you can tailor, you can do whatever you want. But from our public health officer's perspective, she wants the business to have a plan. So if somebody comes in and asks the question, why aren't your employees doing this or that, that they have something they can show the customer of what their plan exists of. So I think these are all major steps forward, but those are the first 3. Campgrounds, RV parks, and outdoor recreation is included. Hotels, lodging, and short-term rentals. separate one. Day camps is a separate one. And this is one we've had a lot of questions about children's sport day camps and that sort of thing. So this gives them guidance. And all of these can open up effective this Friday, June 12th. So that's the other thing. So this gave basically a week pre-notice for these organizations, for businesses, whatever, to understand the guidance, put their plan in place, and then effective this Friday, they can go ahead and open without any further approvals or reviews or anything else. So it's kind of an honor system, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of the public and, you know, kind of monitoring what's going on, and they'll report stuff if they think it's inappropriate. But card rooms, satellite wagering facilities, and racetracks, film, TV, and music production, professional sports without a live audience. So I don't think that affects us locally, but statewide it probably does, certainly. Family entertainment centers, which includes bowling alleys, miniature golf, batting cages, and arcades. And then zoos, museums, galleries, and aquariums. So those are the ones that have been released as of last Friday. The other note on here that I got is there's additional guidance in the preparation stage. It's under development, and it'll be forthcoming to address, because again, we get a lot of comments via email and phone calls on these items. Nail salons. So there is no current guidance on nail salons, but yet we do have the ability to open up hair salons, and a lot of them do an integrated business. So that creates its own set of questions, but there's no guidance on nail salons, no guidance on youth active sports, no guidance on overnight youth camps, no guidance on playgrounds, no guidance on weddings, no guidance on ice rinks, no guidance on roller rinks, no guidance on movie theaters, no guidance on laser tag and other space type activities, no guidance on amusement parks specifically, no guidance on theme parks, and then other specific gatherings. So all of those are planned guidance, which we're hopeful will be released within the next 2 to 3 weeks, if not before. Hopefully, maybe this Friday, the governor will come out with an additional set of those that he can release, because I know weddings has come up as a big question in a lot of cases, as has youth active sports, as has nail salons. And a lot of these are very germane to our businesses and to our sports and athletic organizations. And so we really need to get that. But that's what's going on from the state level relative to COVID update. So I'll leave that with you, and we can give you references to other information if you need it. I want to move on to the second item, local protests and threats associated with George Floyd's death back in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As many of you know, Town Center was closed down by barriers. The sheriff was there, and he called in the National Guard to help provide eyes and boots on the ground, so to speak. Their equipment was out, as was it in the Safeway shopping center. Silver Valley Parkway was closed. We know all of those things. But everything I've read said that it was a very successful initiative by the sheriff, because we had no looting, no damage, no nothing. So I've received a lot of emails, people basically objecting to the sheriff bringing in the National Guard, thinking that was done by the county. And so I want to set the record straight that the Board of Supervisors and other staff have no authority over determining what the sheriff chooses to do as an elected official relative to what additional help he thinks he needs for law enforcement. So that's his venue, that's his domain. He made the decisions. From the results that we've got, I can't disagree with his decision. There was a very peaceful demonstration up in Placerville, for some of you who heard of that. Sounds like everything went well, even though there was a Hells Angels group that was represented there, as well as a lot of the local public and stuff. Everything went peaceful. People were allowed to speak their minds, First Amendment rights, but nothing that got into violence or looting or damage or anything else from everything I've heard. So I think that was properly done. The other thing you should recognize is my office is receiving several emails from people who are interested in pursuing limiting the funding for our Sheriff's Department for law enforcement. So again, that's their opinion. They're willing to, they're open to express their opinions on this. So I welcome that particular thought, but ultimately what the Board of Supervisors does is authorize funding to a given staffing level the sheriff has proposed, and largely that's based upon historical, with some adds or deletes is whatever it is. So the budget review we're going to have tomorrow has no changes in terms of any of the staffing. So it's really a status quo type of budget from that perspective. But again, it's authorizing staffing, it's not authorizing activities. So I still think that's the appropriate way to do it, and it's within the sheriff's determination then. But if people truly want to see the staffing levels of the sheriff's department reduced, that's certainly an open item for discussion at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And just hopefully everybody understands that we will not be finalizing budgets until September because of all of the uncertainty associated with what the governor is processing. The governor, well, actually the legislature is supposed to approve a budget by the 15th of this month. So we got, basically a little over a week, and that's it. The budget's supposed to be out, and then the governor is supposed to sign it by, or veto it, or whatever he's going to do with it by July 1st. So that's one of the reasons why we've deferred Don Ashton's discussion as the Chief Administrative Officer until our July meeting on July 6th. Hopefully we'll know exactly what budget the state's going to provide to us, or at least what they're planning at this point. And then Don can share with you what the results are, what the impacts are to the county budget, and where we're proposing adjustments or changes, and seek public input. Because unfortunately, I think some of these things are going to get into the discretionary services that funded by the general fund. Which do you want, A or B? Because we can't do both. I'm hopeful that we don't end up there, that there is enough federal subsidy and stuff that we can find a way with the judicious use of reserves and other things. We don't have to get to that point. But if we do, I want people to be prepared to participate in that discussion, because that's a very difficult decision when you start cutting back services that some group of people relies heavily on. So it needs to be done with the proper thoughtfulness and just attention to detail. So that's it relative to the local protests and threats. The third item, and I'll take questions at the end, so let me get through these and I'll take questions. Vegetation management ordinance, that went into effect June 1st, which is consistent with what the fire department is doing with posting for the vacant lots in Dorado Hills that have not had the proper abatement done to date. So we're continuing to work that. We're working that with CAL FIRE and other agencies. There are some focus areas, 2 focus areas within the county which don't affect Dorado Hills, that we're trying to do additional inspections and really get significant vegetation remediation done this season. So we'll see how that goes. And then the last thing, I think most of you are aware, but I just want to make sure that Saratoga Way has been opened as of April 30th. And we're not anticipating doing traffic measurements probably until we get back into the season where hopefully school restarts, which right now I think is planned for August 10th, something back closer to normality in terms of traffic flows. So we may not get actual measurements until August or September, but I do know, there was some preliminary measurements made, and DOT has those measurements relative to ADT on Saratoga, but they really don't mean a lot because it's just the start. It's going to get a lot more traffic on both Saratoga and Wilson once we get back into the normal flow of people going back to work that aren't out of work now, and then also the school factors, which we know affect both the morning commute and the afternoon commute significantly in some areas. So we'll see how all that goes. So with that, I'll open it up to any comments or questions for any of those items I covered under supervisor communications. And let's take leadership team thoughts or comments first.
Yeah, I wanted to just publicly thank the sheriff. I think he was way ahead of the curve, and we've seen, when it comes to the National Guard, we've seen plenty of examples across the country for communities that did not appropriately plan. And so my hat's off to the sheriff. I think he struck a balance in respect to, keeping everyone safe, including the protesters. So I think he did just an excellent job, and I can't commend him enough. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Anyone else on the leadership team? Okay, then Kim, would you open it up to anybody who's on the phone who'd like to comment on any one of those 4 items under item 5?
Of course. Now taking public comment on item 5. Please make sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you are joining the meeting by phone, press star 9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There's no public comment.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. So we're on to item 6 then, the leadership team progress reports. And I don't think we have, knowing that our fire department representative, Mike Lowenthal, has not joined us. I don't think we have reports from either the sheriff's office or the CHP. Is that correct?
I don't. unless-
Rob's on the phone.
Is he on? the-
Okay, I couldn't see that. So
Or I see
great.
him on the list.
Oh, we can't see a list here.
Right. So Kim, could you open it up to Rob Smith from our CHP?
I'm sorry, with Rob. It's Officer Brown.
Oh, Officer Brown. Okay.
Okay. I read that wrong.
All right.
Officer Brown, you're available to speak.
Yes, I'm here.
Can you give us a brief report on what's going on in your world?
Yeah, it's been quite a March, April, May, now June. We're in our 4th month of this COVID-19, and we're getting through it here. Operations for the Highway Patrol in Placerville have changed only very slightly. Some non-essential services have been eliminated due to COVID-19. Our front lobby is closed, but we're still offering full services just out in the parking lot. That's the only change, really. Our VIN verifications have been cut down, but we have a great system developed by our Officer Frizzell here so that we can get you scheduled in, and when we're up and running and doing it again, like miscellaneous areas in the state have been doing for VIN verifications. Otherwise, it's pretty much business as usual, other than a whole lot more speeders on the highway. Statistics have reflected that, and we've increased our over 100-mile-an-hour ticket writing statewide by quite a bit. The commissioner has released those statistics, and they're out there and available in a press release. But otherwise, currently we're just dealing with tactical alert for civil unrest that's going on, and serving the people of Sacramento County quite a bit, and the capital, but otherwise it's full service here as well. So that's about it. End of report for that.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody on the leadership team have a question or a comment for Andrew? Okay, Kim, you want to open up for anybody on the phone? I'm going to do these one at a time because they fall into different categories. So the CHP report is what we're asking if anybody wants to comment on.
If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There is no additional public comment.
Okay, thank you, Officer Brown. Appreciate your comments and keeping us updated on what's going on. And the speeding thing I recognize because I've heard a lot of reports about various areas, including Saratoga and Wilson Way, that got recently opened, and with not much traffic on them, I guess people are testing the capabilities of their automobiles. So yeah, unfortunately, that's what happens. So I guess there is one other question, and that would be in regards to the condition where we have a condition. I'm not sure if I know we've been in communication with the Sheriff's Department about trying to do additional patrols, and there's new signage up and stuff, but do you have any new information relative to Heaven with the CHP's enforcement efforts?
Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, we have been doing additional enforcement up there based on school being out. High school kids and college kids have the ability to get out and about a lot more. And yes, we have increased a little bit of enforcement up there at Powers at BD.
Yep.
Also, I have been in communication with Promontory even today about them renewing their reimbursable services agreement for enforcement within the gates. So that is proceeding. So yeah, we have noticed an uptick on that. So
Okay, very good. So
Actually, to thank the CHP as well. I know they've been working in tandem with the sheriff and the National Guard too. So just hats off for all their efforts as well.
thank you.
okay, did we have any phone member participants comments for the CHP or questions at this point, Kim?
There is no public comment.
All right, thank you. So again, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the updates. Do we have anybody from the Sheriff's Department on the phone that I can't see?
If you're from the Sheriff's Department, if you could raise your hand, I'll enable you to speak. No one is raising their hand, Supervisor Heidel.
Okay, and Chief Lilienthal has not joined us, so I don't think we have a report from the Elrod Hills Fire Department unless Tim would like to provide any additional information on what's going on. Okay, you're muted, Tim. He's having technical difficulties, it looks like, so.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Yeah, no, we have the next Elrod Hills Fire Department meeting on Thursday. I think it's June 18th, 7 o'clock. We do not yet have Zoom capability, but we do have a phone-in number which can be provided if you check on our website in the meeting schedule. As with the Sheriff's Department and the Highway Patrol, the Fire Department has been extra staffed for the several nights where it was necessary just in case anything happened. So again, I'll do a shout out to the men and women of the Fire Department for the extra time and effort they've been putting in as well.
Thank you, Tim. And I know the Fire Safe Council, the County Fire Safe Councils and Lake Hills Fire Safe Council have been interacting with the fire department staff and stuff. And I think that's just a great example of teamwork. And I think obviously the county's been involved with a lot of that as well, sharing information. And so I appreciate all of those efforts, because the more community support we get for some of these things, including vegetation management and how do I get help and all that kind of stuff across all the boundaries that are out there, is extremely helpful. So thank you for all those that are involved with those efforts. So with that, and seeing no other comments from any of the leadership team, I'm going to ask that we move on to economic development. And Glenn was not with us today, so I did want to just make a short comment relative to tiny homes, because that's been the discussion of 2 phone calls I've been on in the last 2 days. There is an interest from an affordable housing perspective, and this gets into economic development and being able to provide affordable jobs for people to have, or affordable housing for people to move here and have jobs and all that stuff. There is a significant effort by the county going on looking at what we can do to accommodate different types of housing. Tiny homes would be one of them. There's an emergency situation right now that's out mostly in the Georgetown area and other areas of District 4, where as a result of COVID, given family members have offered their backyard for other family members to bring a trailer in, an RV, whatever, hooking up to septic and making that a residence. And unfortunately, the county has ordinance that prohibit any of that type of use more than a 30-day period. So it got into a law enforcement situation. But I think we all recognize that with the financial stress that's put on a lot of people, either being out of work or being laid off or whatever it is, that there is a need for affordable housing of this type. So we have a 2x2 committee consisting of Brian Veerkamp and Lori Parlin at the supervisor's level, looking at some emergency provisions that would allow longer stays in those kinds of temporary residences. They're not considered a permanent residence when you talk about an RV or trailer. So we're trying to determine what needs to be done there to try to accommodate the COVID impact. And then in addition to that, look at further changes to any kind of a ordinance that might control housing, that would include perhaps a subdivision under a recreational vehicle park that's called mini homes or something like that. So tiny homes. So we're working with a number of the people, 2 different people in the community that are very interested in bringing tiny homes onto their properties or properties they know of. And so we're trying to address that with the bigger picture of what does this mean long-term, and what are the potential impacts, and how do we accommodate it from a CEQA perspective, and all of those other things. But there is an effort going on to look at affordable housing and what that means in terms of economic development, because we've talked several times about various businesses considering moving to El Dorado County and then, determining that the housing costs were prohibitive for their employees or a major portion of their employees to live here. So that's an ongoing effort relative to economic development. So any comments or questions on that from the leadership team? Okay, seeing none, I don't think there's probably any from the public on that one, so we'll jump to infrastructure. And I've asked our planning commissioner to comment a little bit on the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan that's agendized for the planning commission meeting this Thursday. And I think that one of the implications was that there would be a continuance recommended. I know that developers recommended a continuance because of inadequate time for the county to do various things with VMT. Vehicle miles traveled is what VMT is, but I wanted John to be able to comment on that and anything else he would choose to speak to relative to infrastructure.
Thank you. Yeah, the project that never ends, huh? Yeah, we, in talking with staff, they can come to the conclusion with their traffic consultant that they're going to need to go to the Board of Supervisors for some policy decisions to be made. So I know a lot of folks are extremely frustrated. I share their frustration. I know staff is frustrated. I know certainly board members are frustrated as well. We'd like to move forward with this project. And so, so we'll see what comes up Thursday, but as it stands now, they're recommending that it be continued off calendar. So, VMT is new in suburban areas. It's they're well acquainted in cities, in urban areas and so forth, but it's a little bit more challenging trying to get your arms around that in a community like ours. So that's the challenge. I still don't know what all the issues are as it relates to that. It's kind of a moving target, so to speak. So that's where we're at this point, but we're going to get certainly some public comments. And again, I share their frustration as well. We'll see what develops. And I'll leave it at that at this point unless there's any questions concerning that.
Any questions from leadership team members?
Well, yeah, I'll just ask real quick. I know we've probably talked about it offline, John. VMT, we've known for a couple of years that this is a standard that's going to be applied in CEQA, but I guess there's been no real effort at the county level to determine an implementation method or how it would be implemented. Like you said, it's challenging to do it in a rural environment or even a semi-urban environment. Yep,
that's very true. And so again, there's not a whole lot of guidance when it comes to that because it's so new. So we'll see. Again, I can't speak to any particulars, but I know that's about as specific as I can get this because I don't have any other details. So.
And then one more thing for you, like we always do. So is there any chance that VMT data or that analysis would be public before maybe that guidance is in place? Because I know the data has been been collected and analyzed a little while ago, a couple months. There's no chance it's going to be public because I know that in Legistar, when something's continued offline, all the documents go away. It's almost invisible. They break the link and then it comes back later.
Well, I think if staff is prepared through the consultant to give the board some options, certainly that will be on Legistar. But the first meeting, and again, I don't know if those decisions have been made, the first meeting could be to just get input from the board members, and then they have to come back to them later with some policy options. But then, once they have some options, that will be made public on Legistar, unless you want to comment on that further, Supervisor Heidel.
No, I think you've said enough. I mean, I'm not sure what direction this is going to go, but we are trying to look at workarounds and alternatives to keep this moving and not have it stall out because it's got a 7-year history. We all know that, right? So it's a difficult thing unwieldy thing to work with, but I'm hoping that we'll get some resolution in the Planning Commission to take their actions and send it to the board, because I think we need to move on, and the board has got to take certain actions relative to establishing thresholds on VMT, and we're going to get recommendations from our DOT staff relative to that here probably in the July timeframe. But my interest is in keeping this moving and not letting it stall. So,
Well, and I've asked County Council and DOT to collaborate to provide some more details in respect to where they're at and where we think they're going. So,
Yep.
So they'll be providing some additional detail this Thursday. We're not just going to do a continuance and stuff. We're going to talk about this in probably some extended detail. So it'd be good to tune in.
Very good. So not seeing any other comments from the leadership team. Kim, would you open it up for any of the phone participants who would like to speak to the Central Eldorado Hills Specific Plan VMT review?
Supervisor Heidel, you have a member raising his hand.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, yeah, Richard, please, yes.
I apologize for being late. I got the memo. I didn't read it clearly. That's all I can say. How's that for transparency? I do have a question for John. John, when is the next Planning Commission meeting again, the date?
This Thursday.
This Thursday.
The 11th.
Thank you. That was my only question. Thanks.
And it's on Zoom, the agenda and everything like it normally is and so forth, so you can chime in that way.
Thank you.
Very good. Then anybody on the phone who'd like to comment at this point, please.
If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There is no public comment.
All right, thank you. So let's move
Tim White.
on. Pardon?
Hello?
Tim, you there? Go ahead.
Yeah. I do have a comment. The VMT, I believe CEQA does not require VMT analysis until projects that come up are started July 1, I believe. And I know maybe staff made the wrong decision several months ago when they asked for a VMT analysis on a project for which it was not required. And again, I don't know what the staff reasons were for that, but conceivably, the Planning Commission could decide that they do not wish to have a VMT analysis done for the Central Eldorado Hills Specific Plan. And if that is a decision the Planning Commission would make, then the Planning Commission can make that decision. They could then schedule a final hearing and then make their recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, and they could ignore VMT analysis on this project. That still doesn't take away from the fact that at some point in time, the Planning Department staff, the Planning Commission, and the Board of Supervisors will have to decide how they will implement VMT policy for projects that come up after the July 1 date for which that VMT analysis is required.
All I'll say at this point, Tim, is there's some internal discussions going on currently when it comes to options. I'll leave it at that.
And I'll just say that alternative has been proposed, and it was really County Council's advice based upon the ruling that was done by some judge 9 months ago, almost a year ago, relative to VMT that caused the cautionary flag that said, hey, we really need to consider this now before even the July 1st implementation date, because it could have consequences of having exposure from litigation, because somebody can always come back and raise their hand and say, hey, but there was this judgment and you guys should have did this, had the VMT included and you didn't. And so unfortunately, I believe that our judicial system acted in advance of when they should have in terms of imposing this risk factor, because I think a lot of the county councils, at least in rural districts, have responded similar to what our county council has. There's a concern of exposure to lawsuits based upon the judge's ruling. if he hadn't made a ruling, I don't think we'd be having this discussion, but that set a precedent. So Tim, you're much more familiar with those actions than I am, how this stuff works. But certainly County Council has weighed in on that and provided information to the Planning Commission. And there have been several alternatives that have been discussed, but the primary stakeholders haven't agreed at this point to a plan or a step forward. Hopefully they'll get there before Thursday. So we'll have something constructive to talk about, but there has been efforts to try to find ways to break this loose and not get it bottlenecked, but we don't know that we have buy-in yet on that. So we'll find out by Thursday, I guess.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, then moving on, good governance. And Richard, since you've joined us, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on the kinds of things about working with the California Public Health Department, because the Board of Supervisors did submit a letter. So if you aren't interested in talking about that, I can, but if you'd like to talk on anything relative to else on good governance, it would be appropriate to do so.
I'd make a couple just general comments. I think many of us have been following the governor's, I think, very well-intended communication effort regarding COVID. I mean, in terms of starting at square one, where nobody really knew where square one was, I think the open communication that he had in trying to give information to the public, I think was really quite exceptional. And then I have to give credit where credit is due in that regard. That's what I am speaking to. As time has progressed, more decisions have to be made, and certainly not an easy area for any government administrator to be in. And not everything has played out as it was initially said to be. So that continues to comment, I think, practically about the issue of transparency and being not necessarily opposed to, but transparency with trying to make good decisions and the difficulty sometimes that transparency has. As more information is coming to light, I think more sources are asking for details about contracts and things of that nature. And I think all of that will definitely play out in time. Also, I think I'll make the observation that all of the focus relative to COVID has kind of blocked out maybe other things that are going on that also relate to transparency. And a little while back, there was legislation, fortunately, that was actually passed but vetoed by the governor, that would have made it more difficult to find out how bond money was going to be spent, incidental to it being information provided incidental to providing the ballot. And such a measure to impede that information was actually passed by both houses of the California legislature, and surprising to some, the governor vetoed it. So I think those kind of things still occur, and we still need to be, I think, paying attention. But this is a tough time, as this means of communication that we're using here this evening certainly demonstrates it is more difficult to communicate. It is more difficult to learn. And I give credit to the Board of Supervisors with their BOS meeting being on Zoom. I think that's an excellent communication to the public if the public is willing to make the effort to observe it, as this meeting is also tonight. So that's all I have to say, and it's rather general, and I'll let you take over, John, relative to those more specific details. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So I'll just give you a quick comment on the letter that was transmitted, because it was out on Nextdoor and other things, but we were able to get agreement from not only the Board of Supervisors, but the City of Placerville, the City of South Lake Tahoe, Barton Health, Marshall Hospital, and our public health officer to submit this letter. But I'll just give you the summary paragraph and then the request that we had. It says, overwhelmingly, our businesses want to conduct our operations in a safe and responsible manner. while adhering to the requirements from the state or the county public health officer. Many of these businesses have developed their own guidelines which demonstrate thoughtful approaches to protecting people against COVID-19, or they wish to implement guidelines developed by their industry leaders, yet they are prevented from reopening either because guidelines for their specific businesses have not been developed or because their business relies on tourists who are not permitted to travel in El Dorado County. So we have a travel ban from the government. So that's a major part of it. But goes on to say, in recognition of the fact that El Dorado County has not yet had more than one concurrent hospitalization due to COVID since the beginning of the pandemic and still no deaths, as well as the fact that much of the El Dorado County relies on tourism, we respectfully request the following. And I do need to note that this was as of June 5th, so we're going to give you an update on the COVID numbers, and you'll find out we have an additional patient in the ICU unit, but clearly we have no deaths and stuff. So what it says is, in recognition of the fact the county's not yet had more, here's the 4 things we've asked for. Direct the County Department of Public Health to convene a work group to collaborate with counties containing regions that are highly reliant on tourism to develop guidelines that would allow a reasonable amount of recreational travel without unduly putting people at risk from COVID-19. So this is an attempt to make use of our other county agencies, CSAC and RCRC, to convene a group of public health officers and other things to collaborate to try to deal with the tourism aspects of this specifically, because a lot of the rural counties, a large portion of their annual revenue comes from tourism related activities, our wineries, our Apple Hill recreation, our South Lake Tahoe activities, all those things. And obviously a lot of other counties that are high density population are not affected by it. So this is to get the coalition hopefully started. Number 2, relax the stay-at-home order to allow recreating in low-risk outdoor recreation areas and campgrounds. Examples include backpacking, camping, and commercial whitewater rafting. Number 3, amend the lodging and hotels guideline to remove the restrictions on non-essential use of lodging in preparation for relaxation of the non-essential travel ban. And then number 4, make public the timeline as to when additional guidelines for the remaining sectors identified in stage 3 will be available. So we asked for those specific items in our letter, and we asked for a response on or before June 15th. So we're trying to continue to pull the governor and the California Department of Public Health and other agencies forward in terms of getting some of these guidelines released and getting our tourism and a lot of other related activities opened up as soon as possible. So that was the effort the Board of Supervisors agreed to as a group, a collaborative effort with the agencies I mentioned. And I will mention the community, the CCs. The acknowledgements went to our Senator Dawley, Brian Dawley, Assemblyman Kevin Kiley, Assemblyman Frank Bigelow, Sheriff John D'Agostini, the California Department of Public Health, County State Association of Counties, which is CSAC, and the Rural County Representatives of California, which is RCRC. So again, we're trying to move as a team, because I think we get a lot better response from the governor if we're doing this as a team as opposed to individual counties. So that was our effort to try to pull the events or pull the activities of stage 3 further forward with getting guidelines released and going with that. So with that, I'll open it up for any comments or questions from our leadership team, and then we'll go to anybody on the phone. Okay, seeing none, it looks like everybody's understanding that. So Kim, if you would open it up for any comment on the COVID-19 reopening.
If you're joining the meeting by phone, press star 9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There is no public comment.
Thank you, Kim. So we'll move on with healthy communities. And as I mentioned, Dr. Josh Elder is on his military duties as part of the not National Guard, but reserves, the military reserves. So what I want to do is share with you today's report on the COVID status. We ran an additional 444 tests over the weekend and today, so that would be Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We run a total of 7,169 COVID tests in the county with the additional services provided. We have 3 new confirmed cases, 2 of them in the Lake Tahoe region and 1 in El Dorado Hills. all males, all aged 50 to 64. We have 1 new ICU patient. We have 15 new recoveries and 22 active cases. So again, from my perspective, we have a managed approach to this. The total count of confirmed COVID people from testing in the Lake Tahoe region has moved to 50. So out of the 109 total cases, 50 of them are in the South Lake Tahoe area, which is not unexpected given the fact that Nevada, the state of Nevada, has pretty much opened up everything. And we do see a lot of traffic back and forth to Nevada. So I think that's why we're seeing the number of increased test confirmations in the South Lake Tahoe region. Elrod Hills is at 24, which is less than half, obviously, of what the South Lake Tahoe region is, even though our population is more than double what it is in South Lake Tahoe. So I think that accommodates that. But every one of the other areas that we've defined has had confirmed cases of COVID. The lowest number is 2, and that's in the Pollock Pines, Comito, and Kuipers area. So every area is on record with confirmed cases, but I think they continue to be managed. And I think we're doing it in the right manner with our public health officer's advice on things. So I think it is important to try to continue to pull forward as many of these things as we can, continue to monitor the data, and just take it day by day and week by week, and hopefully we can get some of this stuff accelerated. So with that, any comments from our leadership team on where we are with the COVID stats or trends? Okay, seeing none, Kim, would you open up to the public for anyone who'd like to comment on El Dorado County COVID stats and trends?
If you are joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There is no public comment.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to APAC and a report on this coming Wednesday's monthly agenda item. So John Davey.
Sure thing. And I got a hard stop at 6:50 because I'm off to another board meeting, so I'll be swift.
Okay.
Our meeting this week is via Zoom. It's our very first attempt at doing a virtual meeting. We're trying to keep it as basic as possible. Some of the topics that we will be discussing is the, I should get the proper name right, the Montana de El Dorado Phase 2, the draft environmental impact report is out. We'll be talking about that project. The applicant has expressed a desire to at least listen in on that, and we're exploring the option of having a dedicated 1-hour meeting for him next Wednesday via Zoom as well. And we'll publish that for residents, so they'll have the link and be able to go check out.
That's a 45-day review and provide comments period, right, which is open. So there is some time with this one, which I think is very favorable.
Yeah, but in this environment where everything's virtual, there's some challenges to this, but we already have heard from residents that have some concerns or questions. So we hope to have a more respectful time for that applicant by having a dedicated meeting for them next week as opposed to this meeting. This meeting we'll just be discussing sort of the overview of the project, and if he'll be available, he might chime in a little bit, but we want to make it as a simple meeting as possible. The other things that we have is, we'll address the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan, the request for the continuance, and just to sort of discuss where that's at and why that request is being made. The other items that we'll be updating is basically to get residents up to speed. The Silver Springs Parkway Southern Extension of Bass Lake Road, I talked to Rich Lee this week, have some information on that. The Silver Springs residential time extension for that residential project on Silver Springs Parkway. The Bass Lake North residential project time extension was approved. Saratoga Retail Phase 2, where it's adding construction. The Saratoga Way in Wilson, Boulevard connections being open and complete, and some residents' concerns that we've been hearing about. A little bit of update on the El Dorado Hills Costco. There's nothing definitive, but I have talked to the leasing agent for that project, and there's a little bit of more committed information there. And then the last thing we'll be talking, just an overview of just where the Town Center Apartments construction phase is at right now. And we want to make this meeting as simple as possible. We want to be able to see that residents are able to get in and ask questions or get questions answered. And then, it looks like next month we'll probably be doing the same thing via Zoom. We just want to be efficient and make sure we get a good handle on how to run this thing. So that'll be 7 o'clock. The APAC agenda went out to our email list. It's posted on our website and posted on social media. If anybody has any questions, they can get a hold of me, Tim. Our email addresses are on the website. So, and that's about it, unless there's any questions.
Leadership team, any questions for John? Okay, seeing none, Kim, if you just open it up, if anybody on the phones would like to comment on the APAC's agenda.
If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There is no public comment.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So we'll swiftly move to community information and outreach. Cindy.
Yes, we've been busy trying to keep everybody informed and updated with regards to COVID information on both Nextdoor and Facebook, and anything relative to developments, etc. So we're trying to really be as open and transparent as possible about stuff that's going on. And if there's anything that you guys would recommend or wish to see on those feeds that we've been putting out, all the information, if there's something that we maybe an area we're missing, if you guys could let us know, that'd be great. We also want to let you know that we are now going to have meetings again in Supervisor Heidal's office. We do have social distancing rules regarding that. When you come to the lobby, you can come into the lobby again at the Board of Supervisors, but only one person at a time can be in there. When the supervisor has a meeting in his office, they request only 2 visitors, but if need be, we can be able to distance enough to have 3. If there's going to be more people needed for a meeting, we have additional areas, different rooms to accommodate. And currently, there's only allowed 23 visitors if we're using the actual Board of Supervisors chamber. So that's about it. Is there something else
You covered it very well. But basically, what the Board of Supervisors and working with our clerk of the board, we've prepared a COVID-19 preparedness plan. So consistent with all the guidance and stuff from the governor, you have to have a plan. And what Cindy just shared with you are the highlights from the plan, but it also contains things like screening of policies, hand washing, all the normal stuff. But relative to the physical distancing required with the meetings to be held inside the chamber's office, that was what we felt was most important for you to understand. So if you'd like to understand the rest of what's in this guidance, we can certainly send out a copy, and maybe we ought to just do that. Send that out.
I'll link it.
Yeah, link the leadership. Well, yeah, link it on the notes, the minutes, so to speak, and then that'll be provided for anybody that wants to understand the details. We may have to amend these, obviously, as time goes on, but I do want to thank Kim and her team for all the effort put into coming up with this preparedness plan. We're trying to follow all the regulations that everybody else has to follow, even though some of these things are painful. But one of the key things is, obviously, if you feel sick, don't come into the workplace. If you have a planned visit and you don't feel well, let us know and stay home. We'll set it up for a phone call visit or whatever. So just the common sense things that have been pushed out there in any number of ways to try to control the spread of COVID as much as possible. So any questions of Cindy relative to the plan?
You and Cindy, do we have a target date for the board to meet in chambers again?
Just discussing that.
We asked that question with basically the chair's assistant. So Kathy Witherow, and her response was, there's nothing planned near term. It's kind of a see as you go. So we don't have a definitive date. We do have the definition, you can have 23 people in attendance. But if we talk to something like holding a Board of Supervisors public hearing related to Eldorado Hills Central, we all know that isn't going to work, right? So I'm hoping we can get these things open sooner rather than later, but there is no speculation on a specific time frame at this point.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So I think Richard had a question too.
Yeah, this kind of crosses over with communication and COVID and transparency, but A while back, I think at one of the Zoom meetings of the Board of Supervisors, the county health officer talked about the tracking and tracing efforts that were being started up. And I'm sure that whole environment deals with medical records and privacy, and yet I think in the public's mind, the public is concerned about the risk that's to them, and if they can make any generalized decisions based upon what the tracking and tracing of infections might be demonstrating, without names necessarily, but places are relevant, particularly given the several 4 points that the county has requested of the governor relative to, quote, opening up things. So is there any knowledge or data that can be shared that's been derived from the tracking and tracing that would maybe help educate us?
I can provide some because I've sat in on a conference that was conducted by CSAC to really talk about what the specific process was for track and tracing. And the bottom line is that they recognize that there's restrictions on people providing personal information, et cetera. But what they're really trying to do is to notify people who may have come in contact with an individual who has a confirmed COVID, to let them know that they may be suspect to having COVID, and they really want to recommend that they go get testing. So that's the ultimate purpose of this, is to acknowledge to people who've been in contact with somebody they don't know about who has been confirmed with COVID, to recommend that they go get tested to determine if they have also been affected by COVID, and then be able to notify their family and other things. So that's the intent of it. It's not to get into personal information or anything else. It's really to notify the public and recommend testing. But the one thing I found out is that in doing the tracing, the criteria they're using is if you have less than 15 minutes of close proximity contact with someone without PPE being present, that's what they're trying to track to. So the fact that you went to a grocery store and you passed 18 people going down the aisles, and then you got to the checkout counter and you were separated from the checkout person, and you had a conversation maybe with the checkout person less than 15 minutes, they're not trying to trace it to that level. So it's a longer term interaction with somebody without PPE that they're concerned about, and then they'd want to contact that person. For instance, if you were at whatever store, the Target store in Dorado Hills, and you had a long discussion with somebody, close proximity without a mask on and those kinds of things, they want to be able to contact that person at the store and let them know that they may have been exposed to COVID because you had a customer who has a confirmed COVID case, and recommend that they go get testing. That's really what they're trying to do here. So it's not the deep reach, everybody you came across, how do you know who it was you passed in the aisles? It's somebody you had 15 minutes or more of exposure with without the proper PPE in place or barriers. So hopefully that provides a little bit more understanding of what they're trying to go after here. But if you had additional thoughts on it, Richard, I'd be open to hear them.
No, I think you answered as best an answer that can be given, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on the leadership team? I know Mike Lilienthal, Chief Lilienthal, has joined us, so he may have something he could add to this as well, because he was involved with our EOC and the testing and all the other stuff for many, many weeks here. So, Chief?
Yeah, first of all, I apologize. I had my time as 7 o'clock, so obviously this meeting started a little bit earlier than I realized. I apologize about that. No, I'm open to any questions. I did spend about 6 to 8 weeks in the Emergency Operations Center working with Dr. Williams. It's a great experience. And I'm impressed with the way our county's handled the situation so far. But is there any specific questions that I could help out with, or anything in talking about either the contract tracing, which you just talked about, or any of the other issues with COVID?
Okay, seeing none from the leadership team, Kim, if you'd open it up for anybody who's on the line on the phones that would like to comment relative to COVID track and tracing or anything else related to that.
If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. Accepting public comment from Joel Wiley.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you to Kim for running this show.
Yes, thank you. And I was going to acknowledge that at the end because obviously she is the staff person with the county. It's the first time she's been involved with these discussions, but we greatly appreciate her volunteering to help us get started with Zoom. So I'll also extend my thanks to Kim at this point then. Thank you very much for dedicating your time and efforts that it takes to get these things going. So much appreciated. So with that, I do want to move on then, unless Chief, you want to go back with anything related to Elrod Hills report. We asked him to kind of give us an update on what was going on, particularly with vacant lot ordinance and notifications, because that came up relative to signage that's been visible on several vacant lots by various members of the public. And so I think we covered that one, but is there anything else that you would like to add?
No. It's just we're taking it very seriously this year, and the chief's got some new concepts and ideas. I really like the signs that he was putting out in front of the lots, and I think it's going to be very effective in getting a lot of additional compliance this year. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think that public visibility, the fact that our ordinance is in effect and our fire department is following up, it fits very well with what we're trying to do with the county level ordinance and give people awareness, number one, and then compliance and work with this. And so I think that's a great way to do it. So with that, then I do want to go back and add one thing that I didn't cover under supervisors communications, since we're moving to council member items here next. And that is acknowledgement and thanks to the Four Seasons mask makers. John Rasler had made us aware of the fact that there were several people within Four Seasons who put in a lot of volunteer time, making up to over 2,000 masks to help with El Dorado County Assisted Living Residences, the Sierra Sacramento Valley Medical Society, nursing homes, et cetera, et cetera. And while I recognize there have been a lot of other groups that have made masks, which the Board of Supervisors wants to acknowledge at some point in time, once we kind of bring the Emergency Operations Center to a close, be able to publicly recognize all the volunteers' help that came with that. Chief Lilly, I'm sure you can we can ask for your help in doing that, because I know there were several groups that when it came to PPE and people had needs that, the public stepped up. Our library ability to be able to use the 3D printers to make shields and those kinds of things. So we do intend to have a much broader recognition by the Board of Supervisors in the future. But I wanted to just acknowledge, as a District 1 supervisor, the Four Seasons mask maker efforts. So we've got a letter that's been put together on my personal stationery letterhead to Four Seasons, and Cindy did a great job of pulling all that information together, working with John. And so I've signed that, and we're going to deliver it to Four Seasons for them to distribute. And we'll also put a link in our minutes relative to the letter so that people will be able to read the letter in detail. But it was an oversight. I meant to mention that up front, but skipped over it. So I want to make sure we got that covered here. So John Rasler, if you're still on, do you have any comments on this one?
Supervisor Heyerdahl, John Rasler is not on the, is not an attendee.
Okay, so we will acknowledge him separately. So thank you for that, Kim. All right, so I'm going to move on to any other council member items. I do want to acknowledge our next meeting is Monday, July 6th. Hopefully, I guess I probably shouldn't hope. I don't think we're going to have the ability to meet on July 6th. The way things are going right now, I suspect it's going to be into August. So we will probably go to resort to the Zoom meetings, which are somewhat effective, but I think we all prefer the face-to-face. One of the things the Board of Supervisors has been asked to do is to continue the Zoom connections at our board meetings once we're able to resume, because there is a group of public participants that are not able to attend a lot of public meetings. And with the Board of Supervisors being a daytime meeting, that makes sense to be able to provide an ongoing ability for people to comment via Zoom. They can always live stream and listen, but they haven't been able to comment in the past. So I know there's been discussions going on of perhaps continuing that at some level. So at the Board of Supervisors meetings at least, and I'm not sure if the Planning Commission has talked about this as well, but to be able to continue the Zoom format for those participants that can't physically attend the meeting, but do want to make comment. They can always make comment via submitting things to the clerk of the board in advance, but you can't interact during the board meeting, obviously, with the live streaming only type of provision. So I know discussions are ongoing. I'm not sure what the resolution of that is, but I think the Planning Commission should consider that as well, depending upon what kind of response the participants to the Planning Commission have provided relative to the desire to continue with some level of Zoom interactivity as opposed to just a live stream. And in the case of the Planning Commission, it's just an audio. It's not even the video live streaming. So we'll see how that progresses. Next month, we do have, as I mentioned, our planned guest speaker is Don Ashton, who's our Chief Administrative Officer, and we're going to ask him to talk about the budget challenges that are present at that time based upon what the state has hopefully adopted, what the governor signed off on as the funding that the counties will receive, because a lot of that's federal funding. And I know the governor had various ideas of how he wanted to distribute all that and do various things, some of which appear to be fair and equitable, some of which appear to not be fair and equitable. But I'm not going to belabor that at this point. We'll have the opportunity to have Don share with us that discussion on July 6th. And so with that, any other go backs or any comments from the leadership team relative to future council member items? Okay, seeing none. Kim, if you just open up one final time for anybody who's on the phone who would like to comment on council member items, and I think we can go ahead and adjourn.
Of course. If you're joining the meeting by phone, press star 9 to indicate a desire to comment. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button. Please voluntarily state your name for the record. There is no public comment.
Okay, once again, thank you, Kim, for all the efforts you put forward to make this happen. And I think we're probably going to have to continue in July. So if you plan for that, I'd appreciate it. I'm hoping we get guidelines to open up and do more than that from the governor, but I'm not really extremely hopeful that's going to happen. I think the probability is probably in the 25% or less category by July 6th. So we'll just have to continue to monitor day by day, week by week. But I think for planning purposes, we should plan on having the next meeting conducted by Zoom as well. And just a heads up for those of you who didn't understand the change in time, we shifted from 7 p.m. to 5 p.m. because we are using county staff, and this makes a continuance of their workday, and it's easier to bridge with guest speakers so that they finish their workday basically, and they can participate and help us with the discussions here, and then go home as opposed to try to tie back in at a later time frame. So I think we'll continue at that time frame as long as we continue the Zoom meetings just to facilitate staff's time and guest speakers' time. So just a heads up on that. So any final thoughts or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned at just a little bit after 7 o'clock. So thank you for your participation and patience with our Zoom meeting stuff. It takes longer to do these because you always have to open it up for public comment from people you can't necessarily see who's on the line. It's only a phone number, but again, appreciate it, and go forward and do great things. So thank you all.
Thank you.